You ever strike a match in the rain? That's how this trip started. Me, sitting on a soggy log near Mount Stirling, trying to coax a flame out of a damp matchbook that had lived too long in the bottom of my glove box. The sky had that kind of overcast menace that makes you feel like nature's just waiting for you to set up your tent so it can laugh and thunder. My son Matty stood nearby holding the tent fly like it was a cape and he was about to take flight, which, with the wine picking up, wasn't far from the truth. Now, don't get me wrong. I love camping, always have, but there's a reason I stick to old school gear, canvas swag, cast iron skillet, maybe a rusted compass if I'm feeling fancy. But this trip was Matty's idea, and Matty had turned 12 last week. 12 is the age where boys start talking like they've got their own podcast and know how to optimize the outdoors, which apparently involves drones, Wi-Fi hotspots, and a tent that sets itself up in under 90 seconds. Spoiler alert, it didn't. What if we just tell stories instead of setting this thing up? Matty asked, tugging on the fly as it flapped like a wounded bat. That got my attention. See, when I was his age, telling stories was the thing. Every campfire came with some ghost tale or bush legend passed down like family heirlooms. I used to think the campfire needed a story, like a body needs a heartbeat. All right, I said, giving up on the match and letting the wind take my surrender. One story while we try to work out how this bloody tent goes together. But you start. He gave me a smirk, the kind that says he's got something planned, and that's when he told me about the Pact. Apparently some online forum, Camp Talk, or Tent Talk, I don't know, had a post about a group of hikers who made a campfire pact. Every year they'd meet at a specific site, swap a story, and leave behind something strange for the next group. Harmless fun, he said, a scavenger hunt with stories. And guess what, he said, this is the campsite. Now, I've been to Mount Stirling a dozen times, never seen anything but wombats, drizzle, and the occasional angry gala, but Matty's eyes were glowing like he'd found buried treasure. There's supposed to be something hidden under that tree, he said, pointing to a twisted snow gum about 15 meters off. I wanted to tell him it was probably rubbish, maybe an old sock someone left behind in 2003, but that look on his face? Fine, I sighed. But you're digging. I'm too old to be chasing cryptic camping conspiracies. And I'll be damned. 2 minutes later, he unearths a little tin box, all rusted and wrapped in what looked like an old tea towel. Inside, a note, a scratched-up USB stick, and a stick of gum. The note read, "Whoever finds this must continue the pact. Tell your story. Record it. Leave something behind. If you don't, the fire will forget you." Now look, I'm not one for ghost stories with warning labels, but that line about the fire forgetting you gave me a funny chill. Like someone walked over my grave wearing wet socks. Matty looked at me like it was Christmas morning. We have to do it, he said. We tell a story tonight, we record it, then we leave something for the next people. I should have said no, should have laughed it off. But something about the wind, the damp air, and that old tea towel made me feel like I was already part of it. All right, I said, we'll play your game, but I'm not eating that gum. And just like that, the tent finally collapsed. Not set up, collapsed. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment everything tipped sideways. That night the fire burned strange. By nightfall, we'd given up on the tent and unrolled the swags instead. The sky cleared just enough to show a few stubborn stars, and I finally managed to get the fire going with some petrol-scented kindling and stubborn dad rage. Matty had rigged up his phone with a portable mic, one of those podcasting setups that makes a kid feel like a real broadcaster. He called it field recording. I called it talking into your phone while possums eavesdrop. We sat by the fire, backs to the wind, knees up, and that little tin box resting between us like it had something to say. All right, I said, flicking a twig into the flames. We'll both tell a story. You go first. He straightened up like he'd practiced this, cleared his throat, hit record. Okay, he began. This is the story of the man who disappeared into the hill. I half expected a recycled ghost story, shadows in the trees, footsteps in the dark. But this was something else. He told a tale about a bushwalker named Ezra who went missing in the 80s after telling his mates he'd found a second summit behind Mount Stirling. According to Matty, Ezra's last words were, "You'll hear my story again, but not from me." Nobody ever found, just his pack and a cassette tape with static and laughter. I narrowed my eyes. "Where'd you hear this?" "I didn't," he said. "It just came to me." Now that's not normal. 12-year-olds don't just make up bush legends with perfectly creepy pacing and ambiguous endings. But I brushed it off, figured he'd read it online and was just being cagey about it. Then it was my turn. I kept it light, told him about a bloke I knew back in the day who tried to train a magpie to fetch coins. Worked for about a week until the bird developed a gambling problem and started stealing anything shiny. I ended with a punchline about losing a wedding ring and blaming the bird. Matty chuckled. "That's not real." "It is," I said, "mostly. We laughed, but the fire didn't. It gave off this low, almost rhythmic crackle like a pulse. And for a second, I swore I heard laughter. Not Matty's, not mine, but somewhere beyond the tree line, dry, croaky, then gone. I looked up. Nothing there. Just the usual bush shadows doing their weird jitter dance in the firelight. "You hear that?" I asked. "Hear what?" I didn't want to spook the kids, so I shook my head. "Never mind." We packed up the recorder, put the USB stick and the new audio file back in the tin, and agreed to leave it under the same tree in the morning. I thought that'd be the end of it, but the dream started that night. In mine, I was sitting by a home fire that kept going out no matter how many logs I threw on it. Every time I turned around, someone was standing just outside the light, not walking, just waiting. I couldn't see their face, only hear the sound of a story being told, but it wasn't in a language I knew, and then the fire flickered out completely, and all I could see was me, sitting across the flames, older, tired, eyes hollow. I woke up sweating like I'd run a marathon in thermal underwear. Matty was already up poking at the embers like he hadn't slept at all. "You okay?" I asked. He didn't look up. Had a dream. Someone was whispering stories into my ears, but they weren't mine. I felt like I was remembering someone else's life. We locked eyes. Something passed between us, a feeling like we were part of something neither of us had signed up for. That's when I noticed the USB stick. It was outside the tin box, sitting on a log, as if someone had taken it out to listen. "Did you?" "Nope," he said quickly. "Didn't touch it. We packed up fast after that, put the USB and a folded copy of Matty's story transcript back in the box, added a photo of us next to the fire just to be cheeky, and left the box under the snow gum. We didn't say much on the walk back to the car. I thought that was the end of it. Just a weird night with a weird box and a kid with an overactive imagination. But the next night, back home, the fire app on our telly, the one Matty liked playing for background ambiance, started glitching. Every time we tried to play it, it cut to static. Then, for a single frame, not enough for Matty to catch, but just long enough for me, I saw an image, me and Matty, sitting at that fire, only we weren't moving. We were just watching. Let me be clear, I'm not a ghost guy. I believe in things you can touch, measure, cook over a fire, or stub your toe on in the dark. But when that image flashed across our screen, just me and Matty, frozen by the campfire, lit by that same eerie orange glow, I felt a cold flick behind my ribs. Like something small and sharp had slipped into my chest and was just waiting. Matty didn't see it at first. "Maybe it's a glitch," he said, tapping at the remote like it owed him rent. "These apps bug out sometimes, but when it happened again, same frame, same image, he froze. The third time, it wasn't just an image. There was sound. Static at first, then faint like a whisper tucked inside white noise. Finish the Pact. Now I know what you're thinking. Could have been some messed up ad, some background audio from another app. But this wasn't Netflix spitting gibberish. This was our voices, bits of the stories we told that night, the man who disappeared. Schnoo the Hill, the Magpie Thief, all playing out like a broken record, distorted, layered, echoing, and then a voice neither of us recognized. Don't stop telling the fire. That's when I did the dumbest thing I could have done. I called. Bill's my mate from back in the day. One of those blokes who's always 2 beers away from building a conspiracy board in his shed. He's got a UHF radio in every room and once claimed he could hear lightning before it struck. I thought he might laugh it off, call it digital burnout. Instead, he went quiet, then said, "You've been pulled in?" "Pulled into what?" I asked, already regretting the call. "The loop," he said. "You've contributed to a storytelling loop. It's old, real old, older than the bush, older than language. You tell a story by the fire, and the fire remembers it." That's how stories used to survive. Not books, not phones, just flame and voice. But now with all this tech tangled in, the fire doesn't know what's real anymore. I stared at my kettle like it was going to explain things better than, "Bill, you're saying the campfire has a memory?" "Sort of," he said. "The Pact is how people feed it, story in, story out. But you've got tech mixed in now. USBs, recordings, smart fires. You're not just feeding the flame, you're archiving it. And that makes the flame confused, hungry." I paused. "Hungry? You'll be fine," he said, way too casually. "Just finish the Pact properly before the fire forgets you." Click, line went dead. Matty had been listening over my shoulder the whole time. "Dad," he said slowly, "I think we need to go back." I wanted to say no. Lock the doors, burn the USB, smash the TV. But the thing was, I wanted to go back, too. Like part of me was still sitting at that campsite, waiting for the rest of me to show up. So we packed the next morning, swags, matches, and this time, no tent. We hiked straight to the snow gum. The tin box was gone. Instead, there was something else under the tree, a small circle of blackened stones and a single charred stick. Someone had built a fire recently, very recently. Sitting right in the middle, clean and untouched, was a notebook inside. One sentence: "Tell your story, let the fire decide what stays." So we did. That night we lit a fire in the same spot. No phones, no USBs, just voice and flame. Matty told the story again, the man who vanished into the hill. But this time, I could tell he was pulling it from somewhere deeper, like he was remembering it, not inventing it. Then I told mine, only it wasn't about a magpie anymore. I started talking, and what came out was something else entirely. About a man who went camping with his son, found a box, heard whispers. About how stories used to bind people to land and fire, and how tech had twisted that bond. It was like my mouth was moving on its own. I was telling a story I hadn't lived yet. When I finished, the fire flared blue for a moment, just long, enough to turn both our faces pale, and then settled. We sat in silence for a long time, listening, and in the crackle, we heard applause, not loud, not human, but rhythmic, like someone tapping bark with a branch in slow appreciation. We left before dawn. Back home, the first thing I noticed was the telly. No more glitches, no frozen frame, no whispers in the static. The campfire app worked perfectly, even had a little crackle loop that sounded too clean to be real. Matty and I sat on the couch that night just watching it burn on screen. Didn't say a word for a long while. Finally he asked, "You think we finished it?" I shrugged. "I don't know, mate. Maybe, or maybe we just passed the story on. See, that's the bit that stuck with me. It wasn't about solving anything. It was about participating. That fire, whatever it was, didn't want answers. It wanted stories. It wanted presents. And maybe, just maybe, it wanted someone to remember that before Wi-Fi and GoPros and solar lanterns, people sat around real fires with real voices, telling real things that happened, or maybe didn't, but felt true. A few weeks later, I got a letter. Yeah, an actual letter. No stamp, no return address. Just folded neatly and slipped through our mail slot like it knew where to find me. Inside, a single page, written in blocky pencil strokes, it said, "Thanks for finishing your part. The next fire's ready. You'll know when it's time." I read it 3 times, then burned it in the backyard brazier. Not out of fear, out of respect. Whatever this was, it wasn't threatening. It wasn't even particularly spooky anymore. It was old. Like the land itself, it handed me a tap on the shoulder and said, "Your turn, mate," and then it was done. We went on with life. School, work, ordinary weekends. But I'll tell you something. Every now and then, when we go camping, and we still do, I bring a little tin box, just a plain one, empty. We leave it under a tree near camp. Sometimes we come back the next morning, and it's exactly where we left it. Other times, it's not. Sometimes there's a new story in it, sometimes just a rock. And once, just once, there was a USB stick with a recording on it. It wasn't our voices, it was someone else, maybe American, maybe Kiwi, telling a story about 2 Aussie blokes who found a memory fire and talked their way back into the land's good graces. It ended with a laugh, then a whisper. "This is how the fire remembers. Now it's your turn." So yeah, when people ask me what's real and what's made up, I say this: the stories are real. Doesn't matter if they happened or not, and if you're ever sitting around a fire and get that itch, you know the one to say, "Want to hear something strange? Lean into it. You might just be feeding something older than time, and trust me, it listens every damn word."